Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling, and today's topic of the day is about short-lived gimmicks in WWE, and it's going far back before the name change, WWF. So I got about 8 different people I want to talk about. Now, these are gimmicks, just so everybody knows. A gimmick is basically a character that they portray. A gimmick is a little more exaggerated. Like, you go back to 1995, you had a garbage man, a dentist, a hog farmer, and everybody had to have an occupation. But a gimmick doesn't always have to be limited to jobs. It could be part of their personality, an arrogant, cocky heel, a heroic, patriotic American babyface, things like that. But here I'm about to talk about ones that have been almost long since forgotten and not brought up all the time for one reason or another. So here goes my list. Pardon me. So, first person I want to talk about is a guy named Fantasio, who was played by Mexican independent wrestler Harry Del Rios. Fantasio only had one single televised appearance. He looked like this, by the way. There he is. He's a magician, and a wrestling magician who came to the ring, at first with a large candle that he turned into a walking stick. And then he enters the ring, takes off his hat, and a smoke bomb goes off. Whoa! Then he pulls what looks like string beans, a big pile of silver string out of his mouth. Then his antics only get worse. This is on the final episode, one of the last few episodes, by the way, of Wrestling Challenge before it became the Action Zone, or before it became something else anyways, or ended, on July the 16th, 1995. And he took on amateur wrestler Tony DeVito. Jim Ross and Gorilla Monsoon provided commentary that day. This was an afternoon show, like 12 noon. So the match begins, just your basic tie-ups and everything, and the crowd's just dead for it. Oh, before that, Fantasio, I think, took off an extra mask that he had on. It's like a Sting mask here, but Sting wasn't quite in that gimmick yet in WCW. He took off his mask and gave it to a fan, akin to how Bret Hart would give his sunglasses to the fan sitting at ringside. So, the match begins, and then Fantasio's antics really take hold when he decides to, he takes the underwear out from the referee, takes the referee's boxers out from his pants, and does the same thing to Tony DeVito, too, and then rolls him up to win the match. He also shows him spider webs. He was about to go for a clothesline, but some spider webs appear from his hand. Now, you'd think we'd be impressed by that, but we were less than impressed. It was a less than stellar performance. The crowd was dead the entire match. Nobody cared. The only person who got excited, I think, was Gorilla Monsoon, because when he pulls out Earl Hebner, the referee's boxers, out of his pants, Monsoon goes, "Holy smokes!" And Jim Ross chimes in, "He just took out DeVito's underwear! What are those hearts? They're flowers! Oh my God, here is your winner, Fantasio!" He had no music. And this was actually one of the first inductees into WrestleCrap. WrestleCrap.com is the very worst in pro wrestling. A website created 25 years ago by R.D. Reynolds. And this was one of the first inductions. And the tagline says, "Fruit Pie was a better magician." I have no idea who Fruit Pie is, but that's neither here nor there. So Fantasio, I think because the gimmick didn't get over in that one single appearance, I think he had a few house show matches. There's a picture of him on Google Images facing off against Rad Radford. And I think that was at a house show taping for like Superstars or Raw. And I guess, the fans, he didn't get over in that match with Tony DeVito, certainly. And the fans didn't react as positively as management thought they would. So I think that's why they put the kibosh on the whole gimmick right off the bat. So that was it for Harry Del Rios. I think he went back down to AAA or whatever. And Fantasio disappeared as mysteriously as he arrived. So that's the end of him. Another gimmick that was very short-lived is a guy by the name of Friar Ferguson. He was played by journeyman Mike Shaw. I'm just trying to find a picture of Friar. Here we go. Friar Ferguson was a monk character, supposed to portray a Catholic monk. Here's the best picture I could find of Friar. Portrayed by Mike Shaw, who later became Bastion Booger. Now, when Friar Ferguson, he had like 2 or 3 matches on Raw, Monday Night Raw from the Manhattan Center. So this is early 93 we're going back to. He poured holy water on the crowd, which came out of his canteen that he was wearing around his neck. So he doused the crowd with the holy water. The Catholic Church in New York took great offense to the gimmick, as they felt they were making a mockery of their religion and their clergymen. So WWF was forced to abandon the character altogether after a few short appearances. And of course, Mike Shaw became Bastion Booger, a very slovenly individual who ate very unhealthy. And sadly, Mike Shaw died in 2010 due to a heart attack. He was a very heavy-set man, very out of shape too. But yeah, when he was Friar, he just had on this tweed robe that he'd wrestle in, completely barefoot, but he'd take off the water canteen, and yeah, it wasn't much to his matches, so there's not much I can say about Friar Ferguson, but he just had Gregorian chants accompany him to the ring as his music. So, that's it for him. Next one's actually one of my favorite gimmicks, only because I'm a guitar player. I'm an amateur guitarist, so this next gimmick has a very special place in my heart. And who am I talking about? I'm talking about Man Mountain Rock, played by Daryl Peterson, who was famously known as Max Payne in WCW. Excuse me. Former tag team champion alongside Cactus Jack. Now, Max Payne was a popular character. Years later, they released a video game series called Max Payne. It was a shoot-'em-up game, but nothing to do with Daryl Peterson. Man Mountain Rock was an amateur guitar player, and he was sort of cartoonish looking, but, you know, he's supposed to be a rock star. And he had a guitar shaped identical to the WWF logo. I so badly want this guitar. If anybody knows where the fuck I can get it, please tell me, and I'll do anything I can to get my hands on it. It looks like it could be a Fender, but it's not. Here's another good picture of him with the guitar. Oh my god. This gimmick actually could have done wonders, but they didn't push him as well as they should have, in my opinion. What can I say about Man Mountain Rock? So he was already in the ring for his entrance. He didn't walk down the aisle. And Manny Garcia, who was the ring announcer for the majority of 1995, would say, "Ladies and gentlemen, Man Mountain Rock!" Then this drum beat would start. Pyro would burst. Whoa! And would go on and on until he'd hit that final note. Oh my god! And Vince McMahon on commentary would state, "If it's too loud, you're too old!" I actually still believe those words too. I still listen to loud music, so I'm a little hard of hearing for my age, and I think it's my right ear, so forgive me if I say what a lot. But anyways, yeah, it was a cool-ass gimmick, and the matches left something to be desired because he wasn't that great a worker. He was a big 400-pound guy from Iowa, and yeah, his moveset didn't have a whole lot to speak of. A lot of clotheslines, a lot of elbow drops, a lot of power moves. You know, he'd chest bump a lot of guys, knock him down with just his large frame. He'd finally get his opponents down with the whammy bars, just your basic arm bar, and then they'd tap out. And then his music would play, but without the guitar riffs, because he wasn't actually playing. So it would go, doom, just drum beats, doom, just bass and drums. And that was it. So Man Mountain Rock mostly fought amateurs on Raw and Superstars, Wrestling Challenge, maybe Action Zone too. And he was set to have a feud with Bob Backlund. It was teased, and it was in the works. Bob Backlund was a cantankerous heel that hated the youthful generation at the time and was trying to unsuccessfully run for president. Kayfabe, of course. Bill Clinton was president back then. So Backlund objected to the type of music Man Mountain Rock was playing. He thought rock and roll music was dangerous to today's youth. Now, he's not the first person to say that. And anyone who says rock and roll music is bad for you, well, they got another thing coming. So excuse me, mister. So Backlund, Man Mountain Rock on an episode of Raw was playing a different guitar. It was a lot smaller than the WWF-shaped logo one. It was probably about this big, and it looked like a mandolin. But you can buy those at Guitar Center, those small electric guitars. I don't even remember the brand name that makes them. And he found it backstage unattended. Backlund smashed it to smithereens, and Man Mountain Rock picks it up when we come back from commercial break. "Bob Backlund, you destroyed my guitar. Those are my lyrics, man. I put my heart and soul to that, man, and you had to ruin it for me. When I get my hands on you, I'm going to be playing more than a ballad. When I get your ass in that ring." Of course, it was a cleaner product, so he probably didn't say ass. But anyways, yeah, that's kind of how a rock star would cut a promo. But sadly, the match never took place on TV, not on Raw, not on pay-per-view, just at house shows. And I think Man Mountain Rock had a lot of substance abuse issues, a lot of painkiller addictions. And he also was caught recording footage backstage, the real Max Payne or something, for a documentary that there's some footage circulating around there. You can maybe find it on YouTube. You might have to look elsewhere. But he was recording what it was like being a wrestler backstage, and Vince McMahon obviously didn't want kayfabe to be broken. It wouldn't be till a year later, till we had the curtain call incident at MSG. And it was just candid backstage footage, which is cool to see, but McMahon would not let that see the light of day. And he got in trouble for that, along with his substance abuse issues. And I guess he just also, a lot of these gimmicks weren't getting over at the time, and maybe it was just too campy for this new generation. But I liked it personally, and wish the gimmick could have had a longer shelf life than it did, but obviously things didn't turn out that way. And by the end of '95, Daryl Peterson, Man Mountain Rock, was gone from the company. And he retired, I think, not long after, so he's been out of wrestling for a long time and working on music, productions, or whatever. All right, next gimmick takes us back a little bit further to 1991 to 1993. Who am I talking about? The one and only John Nord, the Berserker, all the way from Iceland. He was a Viking gimmick. Actually, that was his first official ring name. He was known as the Viking, but here he is, the Berserker. He would march to the ring, accompanied by Mr. Fuji, kind of a weird pairing, because Fuji then left him to manage Yokozuna later in '92. And he'd march down the ring and yell, "Huss! Huss! Huss! Huss!" He won his matches by Berserker won his matches by throwing opponents out of the ring, resulting in a count-out victory. So there really wasn't much to the gimmick, and it was cartoonish, coming off the heels of the Golden Era, going into the New Generation era, and basically he was supposed to be a threatening Viking from like Reykjavik in Iceland, and he carried a sword and a shield, and he wore the traditional Viking hat, so he was kind of goofy looking. Now, I touched upon this in one of my first videos. It was rewriting WrestleMania 8, how he was supposed to face British Bulldog, but the match never saw light of day due to time constraints. But go back and watch that video if you want the story on that. Following WrestleMania 8 and the missed opportunity and the missed payday, Berserker then went on to feud with Undertaker. I think they had a match or two on Superstars, and he tried to stab Undertaker with his sword. And that angle was supposed to lead somewhere, but then somehow there was no payoff to that angle. So, Mr. Fuji and Paul Bearer would have been involved because they were in Berserker and Undertaker's corners respectively. And just kind of faded into oblivion. Berserker then went on to have matches against guys like Tatanka, Owen Hart, who else was a babyface on the roster at the time? Mr. Perfect, guys like that. And then Fuji went on to manage Yokozuna, so there wasn't much left for Berserker. He was just kind of floating around, and I think the last time I saw him, either the '93 Rumble or it was on an episode of Raw '93 where he lost a Battle Royal. And then after that, in early '93, he was gone from the company. He went back to WCW. He's long since retired and lives in Montana and works as a mechanic, an auto mechanic. And he's from Minnesota originally, so he probably grew up with guys like Rick Rude, Barry Darsow, Kurt Hennig, the Minnesota Pack, as I like to call them. So that's it for Berserker. This next gimmick brings us a lot further down the road. I'm talking about 2014 to 2016, the Vaudevillains from NXT, and later they made it to the SmackDown roster, the main roster. Matt Raywald and Seth Lesser, and their ring names, Aiden English and Simon Gotch. Now, the Vaudevillains were old-timey, old-school grappler wrestlers from the 1920s, like Carl Gotch and George Hackenschmidt. They were supposed to represent. It was the old-fashioned way of wrestling, the old-style grappling from the circus days. We're going back to 1920 here, folks. Vaudevillains had this really cool aura about them. They'd come to the ring, and it would just be this old film strip that would play. The whole black and white effect. This old-timey music composed by CFOs. It was called vaudeville, which went... And then they were baby faces for a short time in 2015. They had this more upbeat theme song called Vaudeville. Da 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 da. Little ragtime, little Scott Joplin-esque. music going on. So Aiden English had a more successful career because he's now a color commentator alongside Tom Hannafin in TNA under his real name, Matt Raywald, and I believe he's married or still to Shaul Guerrero, who was Raquel Diaz in FCW and NXT, Eddie Guerrero's daughter. So he's a Guerrero in any event. Simon Gotch, Seth Lesser, sadly got released in 2017. Okay, so the gimmick ended in 2017 because that's when Simon Gotch got released. Simon didn't get along with a lot of people backstage, namely Enzo Amore and Jorge Arias, who played Unico / Sin Cara when Sin Cara was in the Lucha Dragons with Kalisto. So there were some physical altercations with Simon Gotch and Sin Cara. I don't remember exactly how they went, but Simon was known to kind of piss people off backstage. He was kind of an arrogant prick from what I hear. And I met Enzo Amore at WrestleCon Philly when I was there for WrestleMania 40. And he was like, I'm not going to waste my breath on that guy. But for the most part, everyone in NXT was cool to get along with. But I told him how much I liked the matches between Enzo and Cass and the Vaudevillains. I thought they all had great chemistry, especially Enzo cutting his promos on these old-timey guys. Simon Gotch had that old-style mustache that you can twirl up and put some wax on. I actually tried that many years ago. It didn't quite work out because you got to really grow your mustache out. And then he parted his hair a certain way, so he really looked like something out of a children's fairy tale book that was written, back when Charles Dickens was alive. That's why I liked the look. It was kind of cartoonish, but it also had some realism to it. And the way they would pose, he did the strongman pose, Simon Gotch would. And Aiden would kind of pose like a Shakespearean, learned man. And they finally won Tag Team Gold in NXT at the very first TakeOver Brooklyn when they, along with Blue Pants, their manager, whom I met at Legends of the Ring in 2015, Leva Bates and Simon Gotch are actually good friends in real life. The Vaudevillains won the belts from Blake and Murphy with Alexa Bliss in their corner. So Blue Pants was there to counter Bliss. And yeah, they actually got really over that night and won, but their reign only lasted a mere 2 months before the Revival, Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder, took the belts from them and had an amazingly long reign after that. Great team we'll talk about another time. But the Vaudevillains should have had better luck on the main roster. They were always pushed off to the side. I think Simon Gotch kind of ruined it because he was already fighting with people backstage, Enzo, Amore, and Sin Cara, as I alluded to earlier. The last I ever saw of Simon Gotch in WWE was at WrestleMania 33 in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal on the kickoff show. They used to have 2-hour kickoffs back then. It's only 8 years ago. And he lost. And then Aiden was on his own, and he was teaming up with Rusev to promote Rusev Day. And then he was released. Now he's in TNA doing commentary with Tom Hannafin. So that's it for the Vaudevillains. Let's go back in time a little bit now, back to 95. Let me show you a quick picture of the Vaudevillains, as I've been very photogenic in this edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. 1 second, then we'll go to the next team in just a moment. Villains, WWE. Okay, here we go. Yeah, here's a good picture of them, right in their black and white. Oh, here's an even better one. Hold on. Aha, the pose. Sorry for the light here. Okay, the next team is Techno Team 2000, going back to 1995, and they lasted till 96. So they were there for about a year, but mostly spent time in USWA, United States Wrestling Association. Whatchamacallit. Here's a picture of them. This is Eric Watts and Chad Fortune. Eric Watts is the son of Bill Watts, cowboy. Eric Watts is on the, if you're looking at this screen, he's on your right. And Chad Fortune's on the left. Chad Fortune was known as Travis, and Eric Watts was known as Troy. They wore these silver smocks and these tight Zubaz-looking tights, these silver tights that they wore. And they were supposed to represent the age of the internet cyberculture of the future, bringing us into the 21st century. So Techno Team 2000 were supposed to represent what the internet was supposed to be, I guess. I'm still trying to wrap my head around exactly how to explain the whole entire gimmick, and I'm not doing a great job. But they were supposed to look futuristic, and the gimmick didn't get over. It was a little bit convoluted, I think, for the time. and neither one showed a whole lot of charisma and weren't given a lot of time to cut promos, so I think that hurt them in the long run. The way they got together was Eric Watts and Chad Fortune were students. They were friends at the University of Louisiana or something, Louisiana State University, or something like that. They played football together, and then he got Chad Fortune to join him in wrestling, and then Chad Fortune eventually became a monster truck driver. He drove a Superman truck in monster trucks for many years, and Eric Watts tried his best in wrestling but couldn't live up to his father's namesake. And Eric Watts is notorious for having the worst drop kicks in pro wrestling. Just type up in YouTube, Eric Watts drop kicks, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But the gimmick, they just mostly fought amateurs, and then they had a couple of matches against other more established teams. Like they had a tag title shot against the Body Donnas on Raw in '96. They fought the Godwins and Smoking Guns, and they were coming up short each and every time. And then eventually they got their release and they decided, okay, this gimmick's not working out. So that was it for Techno Team 2000, Travis and Troy. And those names sound like a couple of out-of-work country singers rather than futuristic names. Give them that at least, like Gleep Glop, Cybernet. I don't know. Just come up with something better than Travis and Troy. Two more gimmicks I want to get through here. This is a guy back in NXT. We're going to 2015 again. I'm talking about Marcus Louis. You probably don't remember that name too well. He was a Frenchman. His real name was Michael Vierge. He and Sylvester Lefort were a tag team at one point. This is Marcus Louis right here. They were known as the Legionnaires. At NXT, one of the first takeovers, I think it was Takeover Fatal 4-Way in September of 2014, Sylvester Lefort, who looked like Randy Savage, by the way, long dark hair and the big thick beard and the big sunglasses, lost a hair versus hair match to Enzo Amore, and Enzo carried a bucket of hair removal cream and was going to dump it on Lefort, but Lefort escaped the ring and threw his partner under the bus, Marcus Louis, who had short hair, much shorter than me, and Louis lost his hair and then blamed it on Lefort, which was supposed to spark a feud between the two, but had no payoff, and Lefort escaped unscathed, while Louis had his head hair completely removed, looked like he had his head shaven, and that created this deep psychosis that turned him into a bald, psychotic individual, this monster, menace to society, and he vowed revenge. And basically, he looked so scary. It was like Snitsky when he tried to look like Kane. And this was a much smaller Kane, a much smaller Snitsky, because those guys are close to 300 pounds. So this guy was only like, 225, 230 pounds. He'd come to the ring with no music, just this menacing look. Really scary looking. And then he unfortunately didn't bode well for him. He'd be on the losing end to guys like Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn, Solomon Crow, who was Sami Callihan on the Indies, and guys like Rich Swann, who was starting out, and then eventually he got his release, never to be seen or heard from again in WWE. I think he went to TNA for a while, under a different French name, and I don't know what he's doing now. That's it for Marcus Louis. The last gimmick I'm going to get to is a man who tried to portray a woman. He only lasted all of 2 appearances. I'm talking about Cloudy, played by journeyman Jimmy Shoulders. Cloudy was supposed to be the Body Donna's replacement for Sunny. Here's a picture of Cloudy with the Body Donnas. It's a man dressed in drag. That's Jimmy Shoulders right there, along with Skip and Zip. Sunny had outgrown the Body Donnas, or vice versa. The Body Donnas outgrew her, because then she went to the Godwins and then went for about a week and then went to the Smoking Guns. Sunny gets around, doesn't she? So they decided to counter Sunny with Cloudy. It's spelled Kloudi. Cloudy, definitely reminded me of a drag queen. Oh, come here, baby. You know you want me so badly. And he scared Sunny away. Sunny was doing commentary. It was the King of the Ring 96 free-for-all. Body Donnas took on the New Rockers with Cloudy at ringside, and that's when Cloudy made his debut. Come on, Sunny, I know you want me, baby. Oh, get this thing away from me. Ew, get it out. Chased her through the crowd, and I think Cloudy had one more appearance on Raw the next night, and then that was it. The gimmick just didn't get over, and it's also on WrestleCrap. So, not much I can say about Cloudy, let alone Jimmy Shoulders. I don't know what the hell he's doing now, but anyways, you can see it's a resounding theme that these gimmicks didn't get over. They were not popular with the crowds, and as a result, nothing really came of them. So just fun to talk about, just to see who remembers what. And if there's anything else you remember or want to share, please post it in the comments, and we'll get a discussion going. And in any event, this has been another great edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling, and until next time, everybody, bye-bye.